From trade war, let's move to trade finance and discuss how to deal with currency volatility, hedging, under what conditions and how. And to discuss this currency and trade finance that will power trade, I welcome on stage Mr. G. Padmanabhan, a postgraduate in economics from Kerala University and master's in business administration from Birmingham Business School, holds extensive experience and expertise in bank regulation and supervision of foreign exchange securities markets in India, information technology and payment systems with more than 35 years of experience with the RBI in various capacities. Please put your hands together to welcome on stage Mr. Padmanabhan. Joining him is a co-panelist, Mr. V.G. Kannan. He's the Chief Executive of Indian Banks Association, which acts as a representative of over 240 banks operating in India and plays a collaborative role between banks, regulators, and government in improving customer service with a focus on digital marketing and banking. Please welcome on stage Mr. Kannan. Joining them is a co-panelist, Professor Anant Narayan. He serves as director on the board of ClearCorp Dealing Systems Limited, Mario Global Investments Limited, AMC, SBI Capital Markets Limited, NSDL Payments Bank Limited, Southern Ridge Macro Fund, and Southern Ridge Macro Fund. Sorry. Mr. Anand is a senior Indian analyst with the New York-based Observatory Group, LLC. Please put your hands together to welcome him again on stage, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Moderating this discussion is Ms. Lata Venkatesh. She began her career in CNBC TV18 as Chief of Mumbai News Bureau and is now the banking and commodity editor. Over the years, she's come to be recognized as one of the keenest watchers of Reserve Bank of India and a respected commentator on banking sector and issues related to money markets and macroeconomic trends. She has been a business journalist for 17 years and has specialized in covering all markets, stock, current debt, and commodities. We can go on talking about Ms. Lata and her many achievements, but to welcome on stage is another co-panelist, Mr. Neeraj. May I request you to please join us for this discussion again. A huge round of applause for this panelist, please. Thank you.
Well, for as long as I've been in CNBC TV18, which is from 2002, I have harassed Mr. Kannan at State Bank of India, Neeraj Gambhir at ICICI first and then Nomura, and Anant first at Citi, then at Deutsche, and then at StanChart for views on which way the currency is headed. So today, while this topic is currency and trade finance, I'm not going to let you all go without giving us your view on which way the currency is headed. Mr. Padmanabhan, I have always tried to reach out to when he's in RBI, but there is a thick wall around RBI. The RBI regulators are ring-fenced, and especially Mr. Padmanabhan, since he was making rules for the currency market, extremely sensitive operations, so it wasn't often that we could get the benefit of his advice. But, well, since he has taken over as chairman of the Bank of India, we have been a little luckier. So we have actually the most elite panel you can possibly get on anything, on any matters related to currency. So let me first start with something which is just a bit newsy, and then we will get to the hard-nosed hows and whats of currency trading. First, their guess on which way the wind is blowing as far as the exchange rate is concerned. Let me start with you, Anand. Well, in a way, okay, actually all of you are neutral party. I was just going to say that you're not trading anymore. But if you put all the macros in place, looking at the global slowdown, hopefully, since the Fed has said it is slowing down, it must be slowing down. Do you think the rupee is not going to depreciate so much? Because logically, in a slowdown scenario, crude should be under control. Which way do you think the exchange rate wind is blowing?
Thanks for this, Lata. And as ever, you start off by putting people on the spot. Caveat, if you listen to our views and you make money, please remember us. if you listen to our views and lose money, we never said this, okay? So it didn't happen. But while I think having a view is important, and I'll give you my view, that doesn't mean I'm asking you to act on it, genuinely, okay? And there are various ways of managing risk, which I think we'll discuss separately. Broad view, I think in the short run, until elections at least, very simply, the government will not allow a rapid depreciation of the rupee. So more than macros, the fact that we have elections coming around, I think will cap any depreciation of the rupee. Medium term and long term, there is a basic problem where our core flows are actually negative. And by core flows, I mean our current account deficit and our FDI. Which means we have to borrow money just to pay for this negative core flows that we have. So as long as oil prices are where they are, and assuming they stay around this level, core flows itself determine that we will see gentle depreciation over time.
Anand, the last trade deficit number, monthly trade deficit number has fallen to $12 billion. It was 16 and 17, and I take your point, up until October it was a difficult scenario, maybe even November.
Sure.
But the December trade deficit numbers have come to 12,
Sure.
and if that is because crude is at 60, then do you still think that core flows are all that negative?
I think they are. So quick perspective, and I'm sorry to take some time. FY17, the current account deficit was $15 billion, right? FY18, which is ending March 2018, the current account deficit was $49 billion. That FY18 average crude oil price was $58, okay? Now, since then, we were, of course, expecting FY19 to go up to $80-85 billion at a time when oil was at 85. Clearly, with oil prices coming down, those numbers have changed again. But even assuming oil is at $60 to a barrel, you will still see about $60-65 billion of current account deficit. FDI, on the other hand, net FDI, don't believe the WhatsApp messages you see, net FDI is in the region of $30 to $35 billion. So 60 to 65, less 30 to 35, you have a core deficit of $30 billion. Now, as long as that deficit remains, you can borrow money through portfolio flows into debt, through ECBs and through all of that. But those are amounts you have to pay back eventually, or they are open exposures, right? So your core deficit is a problem, and unless you see exports going up, or unless you see imports being substituted, we still have a $65 billion trade deficit with China, you have a core deficit problem. And to that extent, I do think over a period of, look, there are lots of theories behind this, interest rate differentials, growth differentials, productivity differentials, all that. I'm saying purely from a flow perspective, as long as this core deficit is there, it is good if rupee depreciates over a period of time. It's not a question of, nationalistic, it's good to have a strong rupee. Of course, I want rupee to be strong. Then I feel richer as a human being, right? But if your basic flows are negative, there's no point wanting something. It will naturally gravitate towards that.
No, I'm ideologically, or not ideologically, I'm practically of the view that a declining currency is good for all countries. I mean, the US has bent backwards to print more dollars so that it keeps its own currency weak. Steel or any import, I think 60% of or even more, 65% of the Nifty 50 benefit when the rupee depreciates and lose when the rupee appreciates. But anyway, we are only now asking which way is the wind blowing, and your theory is a gentle depreciation according to the macros.
So nothing much, or we don't underperform the rest of the world till the elections, because I think we'll be controlled. Beyond that, I think depreciation, a natural depreciation over time has to be factored in our business analysis.
Neeraj. Say.
I think it's tough to be on the same panel where Ananth and Mr. Padmanabhan are there, because speaking after Ananth is difficult. He's covered so much, and Mr. Padmanabhan, because we've learned so much from him. I think I started my just 1 minute I'll take. I started my career when he was running the policy at Reserve Bank with regard to foreign exchange, and throughout the last, I think, 20-25 years that I've associated with him, he's the walking encyclopedia of foreign exchange in this market. So, sir, thank you very much. But coming back to the point, Ananth has pretty much summed it up, but let me just say that my belief now is that with the growth slowdown in US and the Fed looking increasingly more benign, less hawkish, unlikely to move If you look at the probability chart of CME, it says right until 2022 there is no rate hike. So clearly the markets are not pricing in a rate hike. With that kind of setup, it feels like that the strength of US dollar that we saw will probably wane. Currency forecasting is a mug's game. It's a very difficult task. But if I were to take a bet, I would say that it feels like that US dollar will probably weaken or maybe not strengthen as much. And that would, in general, benefit the EM economies and EM currencies. And probably we will also be a beneficiary of that wind. Having said that, I think we should bear in mind that at 2 to 2.5% of current GDP as current account, it's not an easy time for us. If it had been 0.5% to 1% of GDP, I think it would have been a lot more easier and be confident about this view than otherwise. I'll stop here.
Yeah. No, I take your point about this 2.5% to GDP current account deficit, which is fundamentally what Anand's view also is that, basically we are using up more dollars than we are able to earn. So the price of dollar has to become expensive. There's simply more demand than there's supply. Kannan, you would agree?
See, typical of an advisor, Anand, gives his views with all kinds of ifs and buts. If this happened, this will happen. If this happened, this will happen.
So you're going to give us a view without ifs and buts.
So I am going to say all the ifs and buts are taken for granted. Therefore, you can never predict the market movement. Deficit of the rupee, deficit in the market is always accompanied by weakening of the rupee. And in addition, even when the rupee was strengthening, suddenly started weakening mainly because there are some problems elsewhere. Nothing connected with oil, just because they lost money in Europe. If you remember the 2008 crisis, just because they lost money in some other countries, they withdrew money from areas where they made money. So therefore the currency has got different reasons at different points of time to weaken or strengthen. Overall, although Anand is very confident in the short run, the managed currencies, I still have a feeling the rupee will weaken, or maybe in the short run, maybe weaken lightly. Even if you see in the last 1 or 2 months, rupee's weakening has been sporadic and pretty fast, large amounts, and strengthening in smaller amounts. Therefore, the tendency is overall to weaken. Having said that, we have an issue, although she said rupee weakening does benefit many of the companies. But with a lot of imports and import-related exports, I think that is an area. Is it clear? That is an area where there's a cause for concern. My view is deficit, oil, Iran, Brexit. So many other uncertainties. Rupee has got more chance of volatility. Volatility in FIIs is something which we have never predict. If the interest rates slightly go up, even if there is a hint that rupee interest rate will go up, because 3 months ago we were very confident that US dollar interest rate will go up. Then 3 months later, now we are saying we are very confident it will go down. And I'm sure 3 months later we'll change our views. So that being the case, I will not be here to give an exact action. You need to look at your position and then take up how do you hedge your currencies.
Okay, I'm going to ask all of you to give me a year-end rupee value, whether you like it or not. But for the last word on which way the wind is blowing, Mr. Padmanabhan.
Year-end means March 31st.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you accept the dictum that like once a forex dealer, always a forex dealer, once a central banker, always a central banker, we are not in the business of predicting the currency. So I come into the picture only if these people give completely different views, so there is a volatility which we need to control. So that has been the view that Reserve Bank has been always taking, so I continue to take it. But,
give us the benefit of your
yeah,
guidance.
but having said that, I think I overall agree with what Anand started by saying, that I don't see too much happening to the rupee, at least till the elections are over, because obviously I think everybody knows that it will be managed. But after that, what happens depends upon many factors. There are many uncertainties, and this uncertainties point more towards depreciation unless we are going to get our policies and competitive strength so right that if there is a rebalancing on account of US, China completely going out of control, etc., we are going to be attracting that kind of flows. Otherwise, I see that over a medium term, I think people should looking at the other numbers, look for a gradual depreciation.
Well, I think there's amazing unanimity on the issue that there could be a gentle depreciation of the currency. So why don't we just wind up this part of the discussion with a number? Neeraj.
To be on this
Okay, 12 months. Do you, your choice really, December 31 or March 31, 2020?
2020. I would think that we will be somewhere close to 70 to 72, where we are right now. I don't anticipate very big move, but you know, it's just.
Okay. So, Anand?
So I'll simply go by the forward market.
Okay.
Today 71.30 was the closing. Forward market is about 3 rupees, so 74.30. So 74 to 75.
Oh, that's a giant depreciation, a big depreciation.
It's a gentle depreciation, by the way. It's not a giant
Okay.
depreciation.
All right, all right. No, I take your point. Actually, if you looked at Indian inflation and then looked at 74, it's not looking like a very big depreciation.
What Anant is saying is don't do anything. I would say around 73 to 74, 73, 47.
Okay, okay.
73, 47.
47, I like that.
We have to remember this for the next conference that we have.
I would look between 73 and 74.
Mr. Padmanabhan, you want to venture a guess?
No, I would say that as long as it is within the 73, 74 range, the Reserve Bank or the government should not worry, given the various numbers. Otherwise, I'm sure that given the way in which the rupee has been managed in the past, there would be interventions to make sure that this depreciation, as we are talking about, is gradual and not very sudden. Okay. But very clearly, there are two things I predict. I think the people should be prepared for unexpected changes happening. So if, which leads us to the next issue that we are talking, if you are going to have a payout at that point of time, you should not be caught napping. So I think that is something that people should be conscious about.
Okay, fair point. And that's exactly going to be the next theme that our panel will discuss. You shouldn't be caught napping if things happened otherwise. Well, even within this panel, you would have, say, Anand saying that the rupee could be between 74 and 75, and Neeraj saying it could be between 70 and 72. So, no matter which kind of family businesses you all manage, you are going to be in doubt as to how should you manage your imports or your exports, depending on what the currency might turn out to be ultimately. So, let me start with you, Mr. Kannan, on that. What are the best ways to hedge? First of all, what time period do you hedge? Up to 2 years? Do you hedge up to 1 year? Do you hedge more short term and leave the long term exposed? And what's the best way to hedge?
See, one of the old theories which I had is never take any foreign exchange exposure. That's the best hedge. So do your transaction in your home currency, sell it in your home currency, no issues. Whether you make money or lose money, you know what's your margins. The next bet is, if you have a position, cover yourself part of the time, because you can never be sure as to how the market is going to move at any point of time. I have seen the market for the last 27, 28 years. I was just telling them that it is like this Vaishnav Devi steps. So it is flat for some time, then becomes steep, again flat for some time, again steep, again flat for some time, sometimes goes down also, then again goes up. Therefore, this is the kind of movement that the rupee has been having. General trajectory, rupee to weaken. So that being the scenario, where you're going to get caught in that particular movement is where you're getting hit. In case the rupee is going to strengthen, then being, say, short dollar is good. And in case the rupee is going to weaken, being long dollar is good. I would always say that you always hedge part of it at any point of time, wherever you find that the particular hedge ensures that you protect your cost or protect your profits.
How much part?
See, in fact, and I have an old theory saying that don't give up good in hope of better. You always think good times are coming. Of course, it's going to come shortly. Then
How do you defend that? Elections? What are good times?
the king of good times is entering.
I'm told the extradition law is, when it goes on appeal, can take a pretty long time, so it may not be around the corner. Anyway, go ahead.
Anyway, forget it. What I'm thinking is, if there's a good times, excellent. I would always say that there are three clear avenues for hedging. One is don't do anything, as what Mr. Anand says. Rupee is going to be same thing as the forward rates, don't do anything. If you have a portion of it, if you think that rupee is certainly going to say strengthen, then you take the position according to this. If it's going to strengthen, rupee is going to strengthen, then just sell everything you have. Sell everything you have. If it's going to weaken, buy everything you have. But how many of us are sure? I think the panel is also totally of a different views that rupee will strengthen or weaken. So I have a theory called 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. 1/3 of your position book forward contracts of the exposure. Not necessarily the net exposure, you could do it gross also. Or if you have the timing of the exposure. I had one steel major who said, sir, my exports are all linked to import price. Therefore, I'm not going to hedge. I told him, you have the timings of the imports. So what happened is, when the exports, when the dollars going up, he started selling it. And then it went up further, and he found that he had to buy back the same dollar at a later date. So if you want to have a what's called so-called natural hedge, you have to book both the legs. So 1/3 you book forward contracts, 1/3 do nothing, and 1/3 book options. Options, most of us feel very uncomfortable with the options, but I would say it's one of the best things which can happen. It is akin to an insurance. So if you take an insurance policy, the best way to encash an insurance is kick the bucket. And if you kick the bucket, you don't enjoy it. So I think in the same line, an option should be taken as a hedge, as a cover mechanism, which should not be exercised. And you can always pat yourself on the back, saying that 2/3 of the time I have always been correct. So this is how I would actually advise most people in the family-owned business.
Well, actually, I wanted to take a poll on how many people are in the business of needing hedging here. Okay, that's a big
Decent.
majority of the audience, at least half the audience. That should be useful advice. Anant, your advice?
Tough to come after Mr. Kannan, but anyway, I'll try. So look,
What are the standard practices?
Sure. So what Mr. Kannan is saying is absolutely right. None of us have a clue where dollar rupee will be 1 year from now. We are bravely throwing numbers. We absolutely have no clue, right? We might be so-called experts or whatever, but reality is we are all hoping you have a very poor memory and you won't remember what we said 6 months ago, right? That's how we rely on our business. At the same time, some of us have very strong views at times that dollar rupee is going up or dollar rupee is going down, etc., right? If you have a strong view, and if it is your business to have a strong view and try and profit from it, by all means do that. So I have seen corporates who actually have this dynamic hedging model where they actively take a view and they actively implement their view, right? So that is one way of doing it. If you're doing that, you have to be ready for ulcers, you have to be ready for family fights, you have to be ready for a lot of volatility. You could end up buying when it's high and selling when it's low because you're just going by greed and fear and doing all the wrong things all the time. Yet, and by the way, theory says that you have efficient markets, and in efficient markets, you cannot beat the market by having a view. I don't agree with that theory because that starts off by assuming that you have an efficient market. Indian markets are not efficient. So I've personally seen people taking active views through a logical process and consistently beating the market, maybe 55-60% of the time. So it happens. Successful operations are there. As a family business, for instance, running a currency risk, you have two objectives. One is you want to try and maximize the rate you get if you're an exporter or minimize the rate if you're an importer, right? You want to improve your cost or your revenues. That's one particular requirement. The second requirement is you don't want to live with volatility. You don't want quarter-on-quarter numbers going very good, very bad, very good, very bad. You'd rather have a smooth number. The two are different objectives. By the way, there's research to tell you how do you manage these two different objectives. How do you try and maximize your revenue objective while at the same time minimizing your volatility objective. And there, magically, and no surprises, what Mr. Kannan suggested is absolutely right. For dollar rupee for the past 20 years, if you were hedging your total dollar exposures up to the extent of around 40%, which means if you have $100 million of exports and you had hedged 40% of those exports, your quarter-on-quarter volatility of your actual revenue would be the minimum. Mind you, at 40%, you are not the best. If rupee is depreciating, as an exporter, you are better off not hedging. If rupee was appreciating, as an exporter, you are better off hedging. That is a directional view depending upon the directional, which way the market goes and whether you're right or wrong. But if your objective is to minimize volatility, one formula which seems to work is go 40% hedged. The choice of instrument can be different. Okay? And that 40%, by the way, can be a dynamic number which you have to keep updating over a period of time. Now, giving a formula like, if I have $100 million of exports in a year, at any point of time, I'll be $40 million hedged, can be a very boring process. We all like to have views. So what risk managers sometimes do is, they have that fundamental 40% formula, and then they give some leeway around it based on views.
So 30 to 50.
So 30 to 50 or 25 to 55. So the CFO also feels like he or she is earning his bread by doing something, and you have that flexibility around that core view. But you don't deviate from that core view to an extent where you start regretting 100%. So that's the other approach to use.
Neeraj, your view as well, and as well instruments. I mean, is forwards the best way to do it, OTC market or futures, currency futures market, and options as well?
Yeah, so Anant and Mr. Kannan have summed it fairly well. I'll not delve into that. All I'll say is that at any point in time, once you've decided what you want to do, whether you want to hedge, whether you want to keep it open, you have a range of ways to do the same, right? You can go through the forwards. You can actually do a variety of option strategies. You can be completely protected and buy a call or a put option, or you could actually take the other way around and write a call and put option. So, or to some extent, to the extent the regulations allow. So, the key and important thing to note is that if some strategy seems too good to be true, it is indeed too good to be true, right? So be wary of your bankers. I've seen this in real life, that people believe that there are strategies that they can continue to use, which will continue to give them positive carry, and at the same point in time, cover their exposure, and hence there is a consistent year after year 2 to 3% carry to be gained. It just seems too good to be true. There are no free lunches. Be very, very mindful of that. That's, I think, why for people who are more venturesome in terms of using strategies and structures, I think that's my basic sort of advice, that you cannot always win. There will be times when you will actually pay the price.
We realized after 2017 that very often traders mistake a bullish market to be their own investment genius, and realize it only after that rally is over. Mr. Padmanabhan, basically from a regulator standpoint, what are the do's and don'ts? What are the follies you have seen, and what would you warn the businessmen here against?
Okay. Pardon me to elaborate a little bit.
No, please go
I
ahead.
think first of all, I have to start by narrating an incident which I faced when I was in the Reserve Bank. And these were the days of, heady days of volatility. Let us say that rupee was always moving in one direction and Reserve Bank was running literally from pillar to post to control. And one day we came into the, what we call the war room, and decided that today everything was all right, nothing will happen, when suddenly rupee started sliding. For no reason. There was nothing apparently which the Reserve Bank could understand. So then, like you, people who were in the field, we called up somebody and said that why is rupee weakening or becoming volatile? Then they said, sir, we have called up the top-notch traders in the market, and they have all told us one reason. The Russian president, Boris Elstyn, has been taken to the hospital. I said, what is the relation between Russian president and rupee? Sir, that you may not understand sitting in Reserve Bank, but the traders understand. So the rupee depreciates because of that. Now, why I want to tell you is this is how the market works. So when the market works this way, you also, all these strategies that have been stated, there is one important thing that you need to keep in mind, which is the broad principle that taking an insurance when you are 60 is lot more expensive than taking an insurance when you are 20. So when the volatility has started, if you start hedging your exposure, that is going to create further problems and it's going to be more expensive. So I would think that principally you will have to decide that. Yesterday somebody was telling that how do I run a business when my margin is 5 basis points and I give a GST of 28%. So you will have to decide what's the kind of numbers on which you are prepared to take a risk. And unless you have very strong views on currency and unless you have a treasury which does lot of research, I think even this view that you get from whoever is running your treasury, please don't take it for granted. So this is a game which many people, it will be difficult to understand if people, as Neeraj said, that if people pretend that they really understand what is happening, it is not so. So I would recommend that any point of time, I would say at least the short end, the 6 months to 1 year, make sure that you are, because it's a short-term volatility which tends to kill the small businesses rather than, a sustained depreciation or anything like that. So this is where you need to be more careful about how you manage your short-term payables next 3 months, 6 months, rather than remaining open, because I think that the price you will have to pay will be extremely expensive. And I think we have several cases, whether they took the wrong instrument or the right instrument, starting from the Tirupur saga. I think we have several issues that we have seen. You need to be careful. And on the point that Kannan made about the steel industry, it's very important. At least there you must make sure that you are hedging your mismatches through what we call the swaps or anything like that, but don't remain open. But here what people basically try to do is, if you have their view on the currency and you are on both sides, they keep one side completely open. That creates problem for you, that creates problem for the market, what we call the leads and lags, and then there are problems.
All right, thank you very much for that, Sadhanaban. Mr. Kannan, speaking about incidents, often you learn a lot from an anecdote. Is there something that you want to narrate merely to drive home the point that 1/3 was a good idea, or that 1/3 also sometimes doesn't work?
Mr. Padmanabhan mentioned about Boris Elton. I still remember the incident on 19th of August 1991. This is a very important day when Gorbachev was...
Evaluation day.
That was 1st of July. Okay, 19th of August 1991, I almost lost my job.
That's why it's a nationally important day.
What actually happened was, early in the morning, around 8 o'clock in the morning, when we all trooped into the dealing room, I don't know, many of you recall, those days we had what is called a totally RBI managed foreign exchange in the country. We had what is called a floor and a top. So, rupee used to move between that. You cannot do a trade below this, you cannot do a trade above this. But in the morning from 9 o'clock, RBI did not announce its so-called parity. We are all wondering what's happened. What actually happened was Gorbachev was taken to Dachau, and for almost 25 minutes, the sterling was moving like no man's business. It has moved almost about 5 to 6 cents in particular half an hour. That day in the morning, so we had taken out what is called the card rate. So when you took the card rate at 9 o'clock, that was based on a particular rate. After 25 minutes, the rate was so far away that people could have come and sold the sterling to me in the morning card rate, and I would have been hit. And I actually lost 21 lakhs rupees a day. So that's one incident where we felt that you have to be always in tune with the market. Another incident which I tell you is, when the currency was weakening, I would say strengthening a lot, the person wanted to buy the currency. It was basically Japanese yen. So I told him, it's already lost. No, so it will lose more. So I want to book a forward contract. It will gain more, and I want to book a forward contract. I said, having lost so much, buy an option. So it was only about 20 days. slightly expensive, but as I said, it becomes very expensive. Then I said, by buying a forward contract, you are locking into a firm rate, but you are losing an opportunity in case the currency weakens. So what he did was he took my advice, and fortunately I was right. So I took my advice, I said, and he paid slightly more. So he had capped his loss. So invariably, what actually happened was the currency weakened, and he made so much of money. He came back and said, "Sir, not only the insurance premium I paid, I've lost." Most of the occasions, all of us are averse to taking options. Like Mr. Padmanabhan says, "Arey, mera kharcha waste ho gaya." You see all this vehicle insurance. I am a careful driver. I will never have accident. Nothing will happen to me. So why should I pay the insurance premium? You may be a careful driver, but the fellow opposite you, or the fellow behind you, or the Brexit, or the oil is not going to bother about you.
Or Gorbachev for that.
Or Gorbachev man. So therefore, this particular incident, always I recall and say, no certainty in the market. Therefore, option as an incident was something which is ingrained in me as a great experience. And like Mr. Padmanabhan said, taking options when the volatility is very low. What is the probability of death at the age of 20? Low. That means the volatility is low. The probability of death is much more higher at the age of 60. That's why the insurance people will also fleece you when you go at the age of 55, 56. Therefore, when the volatility is low, that's the tendency, rupee is going to be steady, why should I do anything? In fact, that is the right time to take an option. Therefore, you are at a very nominal price, you lock into the worst rate. If you don't exercise the option, you will get a rate much better than the market, is what my advice. Very difficult to explain to your bosses if you are only CFOs or treasurers, because bosses always want profits. So that is an issue which we always have.
Fortunately, you can report to your risk officer, who now mandatorily has to report to the board. So probably you have some leeway there. By the way, I remember the Reuters headline now on August 19, or whenever you said it was 1991. The Reuters headline was "Rupee takes a pounding."
In fact, there was no Reuters in India then. You had what's called PTA Art Monitor.
Yes.
So Reuters was not operation. No, it used to come, and the rate used to move.
We got a Reuters in Economic Times at that time. We used to tear the
It was
paper.
Reuters which was doing it, but updation used to take something like around once in 1.5 seconds. Whereas the current Reuters changes something like 30 times in
We didn't even have it on a computer. It came in the teleprinter, and we had to print
we had the Art Monitor.
No, Economic Times.
SBI was advanced.
Yeah, Economic Times was
Ahead of the
I can
time.
assure you.
No, I tell you,
We were still
that
subbing
was a
in pen and
nightmare
paper.
because I sold the sterling to RBI, and RBI came back and said, I cancelled the deal.
You're
So they had to cancel,
taking it
take
back.
a knock of 21 lakhs. Then we, of course, made a claim and we got the money back.
Ultimately, where is your money or RBI money goes to the government, right?
Okay, Neeraj, do you think currency futures should be used more if people would want to? The exchanges should be used more than OTC?
You know, both exchanges and OTC have their advantages and disadvantages. I think it's important to know at what point in time what instrument is beneficial to you.
Is it that smaller amounts are better hedged on the currency futures exchange?
One is that any liquid market like an exchange traded market will be the most cost effective market by definition, right? In terms of your entry and exit, in terms of impact cost. Also, the usage of standardized contracts, right, helps you sort of take the position, unwind the position, take the position, unwind the position, if you're into that kind of business. So certainly exchanges have their advantages. I would say that OTC also, I wouldn't say that exchanges only win in that sense. OTC is also important because it helps you structure and customize the contract the way your individual asset and liability profile or cash flow profile is. So you take it. The only thing that I would say is that we are in a little bit of an advantageous situation here at this point in time, because globally the banking system has moved towards enforcing exchange-like margins on the OTC contracts.
That is after the crisis.
Right? So post global financial crisis.
More expensive, you mean, to hedge?
Yes. So what we are used to in India is the fact that if I'm an SME, I'll go to my bank and say, hey, give me a line. and the bank will give me a line. I'll not pay anything for that line. When I need to, I'll book a forward contract. I don't give any margin to the bank. So essentially, the bank is taking a clean exposure on me.
But that's why they give a huge spread and make their money, right?
They do, but incrementally the regulation is making it difficult for banks to play that game. Because now the banks are required to keep aside capital for these kind of exposures, and also the internal pricing mechanisms are required to keep aside, you're required to keep aside charge for this credit risk, right? So all I'm saying is that the benefit that OTC market had is gradually weaning away, and hence people need to start thinking about the exchange traded markets a lot forward.
A lot more.
I think I can share with you the international thought in this because we discussed this quite a lot at the Basel. I think the thought process which happened was that in respect of small participants, the exchanges which are more organized offers more transparency, more straitjacketed rules, and because there was a margining system which was anywhere in place, they would not be running a huge risk which they go under. But it was well recognized that the world as a whole cannot function on exchanges alone because the OTC has its own, because of the variations that the straitjacketed
Customized
products
solutions it offers.
it may not work. Yeah, that was why I think in many countries there was a genuine push towards the exchanges, and also what Neeraj said, that where it was not possible, the margining or mark to market became important because that became a credit risk ultimately as far as the banks were concerned.
Anand, winding up thoughts.
So very quick couple of points to add to what Neeraj said and what Mr. Kannan said. First on OTC versus exchanges, I think Neeraj summarized it extremely well. For a lot of clients in India, I think the larger problem has been that banks, they look like they're charging a lot on currency transactions. And that's been a constant complaint that I've heard as a banker, and I've also heard outside of banking now that I'm an academic. Exchanges offer definitely cheaper, thinner margins with the problem of having to place margins, which will get equalized to OTC markets like Neeraj mentioned. The other thing you have to keep in mind is that banks often charge you a lot on exchange transactions because they're probably underpricing you on the funding transactions. Bankers typically give you cheaper loans and charge you more on fees because that shows up as better revenue, quicker revenue for them, which they can book right away.
That is why public sector banks give credit and foreign banks give exchange products in this country. Often the complaint about high prices is right, but if you look at the totality of what the bank is offering, including lending, etc., it might not be that bad. It's still wrong because you're underpricing one product and overpricing another product, but that tends to be the politics there. The second point on this insurance, and I've had a lot of beating by Mr. Padmanabhan in my banking days as well, where I think he's beaten up both of us several times when we were bankers. Here is some bad news for all of you who are managing currency risk. If you're looking for a hedging to the extent that there is no risk, that there is no, whatever happens to currency markets, you're completely, you're not affected by it, that nirvana does not exist. Okay? For you to be, if you're in currency business, if you're an exporter or importer, for you to say, I am oblivious as to what happens to currency markets, you have to give up your business, take up sannyas, go to the Himalayas, do tapas, then you can say that.
Or you have 60% product margins.
Or you have, even then you'll have heartburn, right? So this whole point about, 100% hedging, for instance. By the way, 100% hedging is a position by itself. The moment you say I'm a large importer and therefore I will hedge all of it today, great, it looks like all your margins are frozen in rupees, but you could have a competitor who is not hedged, and therefore if dollar rupee comes down far lower than, he'll underprice you. And I've seen this happening so many times, not just in India, but also in other markets which I've interacted with. So, and options, which, Mr. Padmanabhan has often said this to us, and often while boxing our ears, saying, what Mr. Kannan said, if you're buying insurance, you're not hoping that your car crashes, right? But the reality is options cost money. There is an option premium which you have to pay, which is not cheap. And factoring that into your margins and all that becomes a tough proposition. So you don't always have that pricing power. So the reality is we can have all these discussions, we can look at ways in which we can manage things better. Yes, there are some ways in which costs can be genuinely brought down because of some dislocations, etc. But by and large, there is no getting away with the fact that risk management is not easy and risk management does not have panaceas.
Yeah, but just one sentence, just a sentence. I think the balancing act the regulators are trying to do, which is critical to understand, is that as taking off from what Anand said, I think the risk once contracted doesn't go away. It exists.
Yeah.
What they are trying to do is whether it can be transferred from an entity who is less competent to manage the risk to an entity which is more competent. But that's a call which sometimes is right, sometimes not right, because as a result of which probably you are increasing the risk of the financial sector, the banking system. So it's a cat and mouse game ultimately. I think that needs to be appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, the next part of this discussion would be how will bankers manage their risk? But since we are addressing family managed businessmen or businessmen managing family business, I guess we will stop it there. I think this was a master class in hedging. A round of applause for my panel.
Fantastic, sir. As ever. Neeraj, thanks for joining us.
Questions?
Yeah.
6 minutes.
Should we allot some time for questions? Okay. Gentlemen, yes. I think pass on my mic to
Sir, he'll come. He'll come. But while the question comes, I have to thank Neeraj publicly. He was not supposed to be part of this panel. At the last minute, we dragged him from the previous panel as well.
It's
So
part
thank
of
you,
the
Neeraj.
volatility.
Special note.
Part of the volatility.
Part of volatility.
Thank you very much for that lovely discussion. My name is Siddharth Vimrajka. I am from the petrochemical space, and 98% of my business is imports. So I go through all the challenges that you spoke about. My one question I'd just like to understand is, would we see something like a buyer's credit or LOU come back? Would there be any possibilities of any such instruments coming
Bias
back?
credit.
Buyer's credit or letter of understanding, the LOU.
LOUs.
What you're saying is you want the LOU to come back.
No, so you know, it was a great tool for the import trade across India, who were genuinely using it for the right purposes to get funding at a much cheaper rate and for a longer period of time. So you were getting credit along with you were getting great interest rates. Now that's kind of gone. So any such possibilities?
Yeah,
what's your
I'll
view
answer
on that?
No, it's coming back, I think, is ruled out. This Wednesday will be 1 year of Nirav Modi. To expect that it will come back is, I think, asking for too much, isn't it?
No. I think what has happened, I think Kannan may be aware of, I think there is a new product which has been designed. Some of the banks have implemented and some of the banks are in the process of looking and taking to the board. I think what is really happening is that I think couple of issues that happened to make LOU look bad, it was a great tool to start with, was when the bank which was discounting this was giving the money to the bank which was opening this thing, and the whole who was utilizing the funds, all this went out of this thing. So shorn of this or taking away the problematic part of the LOUs, there is a new product which some of the banks which have international operations have designed. I think I suggest you talk to the banks which have international operations, they may be able to advise you. Let me not in this forum go into the details, but I think something is being worked out to make sure that. But obviously, earlier the way it was being done, one thing you must understand that the participants or the borrowers were entirely riding on the credit curve of the bank. That will no longer be possible. So that it will come back, the product will be available, which will be a more classical buyer's credit rather than the Indian version of the buyer's credit.
Hi, I'm Abhinav Jain.
Yeah, go ahead, please go ahead.
Yeah,
Hi, I'm Abhinav Jain from Raipur. A majority portion of my business is in exports. So I've actually heard and read about many panels about the current situation or 3 years, 4 years, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months situation of the rupee. As a businessman who's looking into the future and planning for long term, And minority portion of my business is also importing stuff that I process and export. When does the panel see the rupee dollar value to go to 85, 84? And given the inflation, the rising wages, and the Indian election, the US election, maybe some other global scenario, crisis and impending financial crisis, which is probably going to come again. What year does the panel see rupee going 84, 85?
We are having trouble, discussing that tomorrow, and you want us to go. I'll give you the market answer. By the way, market quotes up to 10-year forwards as well. It also quotes 15 years if you go to the right banks. I don't remember the exact numbers now. I think the 5-year forward rate interbank is about 17 rupees, which means if 71 is the dollar rupee today, you're already looking at 5-year forward at about 88. The 10-year forward is in excess of 100. Now, this is not a reflection of where markets eventually will go.
Never. Let me warn you, never has been a spot at that particular point of time a reflection of the future which happened.
Absolutely.
This is precisely what some of the agencies are doing to try to find out whether your foreign forward contract was a mistake or not, but that's different. So I think this caveat is important.
Yeah. So the way in which mathematically we look at this is the forward rate is, in absence of anything else, a predictor, but the range around that predictor can be anything.
Yeah, anything.
And we've seen it both going extreme this side and extreme that side. But I think gentle depreciation of the rupee seems like here for the next few years, unless, as Mr. Padmanabhan I think mentioned, we see actual reforms coming through by which our exports eventually meet their potential, and we see structural changes in the nature of our trade deficits.
You know, right now I'm having a little bit of a difficulty predicting how much time it will take me to reach home from after we finish this. So what you are asking for is a very long-range forecast. I'm not able to forecast the next 1 hour. And that's basically what I want to tell you is the state of human ability to forecast, right? And what I will request you is to rethink why this number is so important for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Because bear in mind that we cannot forecast future. So if your business is based upon figuring out when rupee will reach 84, 85, I would suggest completely rethink about it.
I presume it's a curiosity question rather than a business question. Okay.
See, I'll tell you one thing, my experience, even the other currencies is, yen has been at 247, went down to 90, went up to 137, came back to 70, then again went up to 120. So this volatility, when it was at 247, no one thought it will even break 200. When it went below 100, 100 is going to be the peak. Again, it went up to 120, came back to 70. So I think it's a very difficult ask of predicting any currency.
No, if not for any other reason, the clock is already saying that we're over time. So thank you very much once again, gentlemen. And just a word, I mean, if 5 years you've had crude at around $50, $60, and you had a government with the 335 majority, and you didn't have an appreciating currency, it looks like depreciation is more likely than appreciation. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you to our esteemed panelists, Mr. Padmanabhan, Mr. Kannan, Professor Ananth, Mr. Neeraj Gambhir, and Ms. Lata. Thank you, Ms. Lata, especially for moderating, panelists such as these in a very, very balanced way. I think perhaps there are no right answers, but the right approach is to keep the balance. Thank you so much. May I request Dushyant Bhalla and Rishi Jain, our alumni, to please come on stage to felicitate our panelists. May I request Dr. Tulsi to join us for the picture, please. Thank you. As we speak, there is a parallel session on innovation and sustainability by Ms. Birgit Leiden in the Maxis banquet on the first floor. So in case that interests you, please make sure you make time for that.